There used to be a lot of grapes in the county back in the 1800s. It took up until, I think, into the 80s before we caught up with the acreage that used to be planted in Sonoma County. In those days, it was mostly Zinfandel. We had grapes on this ranch in the 1890s. Mostly we had was some Zinfandel, Petitcera, Malvasia was a nice grape, and so was Petit Syrah. This ranch was originally owned by a guy from North Carolina. His name is Solomon Walters. And then in 1880, he bought this property here. He built a big Victorian 8-room house right where our parking lot is. And he started planting grapes in the 1890s on both ranches. And then hops was coming in, and it was one of the things to do in those days. So most of this land down on the bottom here was planted in hops. So then he built this hop kiln, and he started in 1902, and he finished in 1905. We didn't come in on the picture until 1938. We started with the hops, and then we always had about 50 acres of grapes here. We didn't do too much with the grapes because, $40 a ton, you couldn't afford to pull out grapes. We weren't getting any money. They were easy to take care of. When I was 8 years old, I was pruning and helping my dad. In 1953, we quit raising hops. Hop market went to pieces. And so then we started raising string beans down here in these fields. And one year we had 400 tons of string beans. And I couldn't imagine be enough people in the whole world to eat that many beans. We were just one small grower. So then we started planting grapes in between. The old vineyards that we originally planted were 14-foot spacing, and we put 2 rows of beans down, and we put in a temporary trellis, and that paid for the putting in the grapes. And then I tried to tell my dad, I says, you know what, we ought to plant some varietals. And all the old timers, oh, don't plant those darn varietals. They don't produce them. You can't sell them. You can't. There were no little wineries around. And so finally, I talked him into putting in a block of Sauvignon Blanc in 1960. Struggled for a while, but the grape business got better and better, and prices started going up, and we're putting in better varieties. In France, they're limited to how many tons per acre they can grow to get the best quality. They're controlled. And I says, that's what we need to do here. So I looked for a French clone of Pinot Noir. From then on, I started planting more Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And that's about all I've ever planted since. I had something to do with at least the Pinot Noir thing on this Russian River Valley. Before I started putting in the French clones and everything, Russian River Valley wasn't too well known in Pinot Noir. I got a pretty good reputation, but in order to do it, I have to, I have a philosophy that I keep my Pinot Noir production down. I thin. I do a lot of things. I was the first one to ever pull leaves, doing thinning. A lot of people still won't thin. Pull a second crop, and then there's little shoots. We take those off. They have maybe a couple of bunches on them. They're not the best quality. Then I go through my vineyards probably 5 times. This is fertile till we get in it. Down into here, it starts getting shallower. The topsoil is less. It gets rockier, and you can start seeing it in the vines here as we go off this hill. And then over further by my daughter's house, there's a lot of clay. But down in here, you'll see rocks like you can't believe. It's totally different. You don't see these big rocks up there where we were. This is the trellis system now that I'm using everywhere. It's called a vertical system. You cordon a vine. Now this field, because they're closely spaced together this way, we only go one way with the vine. You see, as they grow, say we prune them next year, we'll prune them back to one spur, probably that one, and one on this side, one here. Just one spur with 2 buds on it. And then as they grow, like they're growing now, we train them. We have people come along and push them up into the wires. See, there's 6 wires. And we keep them going that way, all up through that way. That way they don't loop over. It makes you more room in the row, easier to pull leaves, exposes the grapes for rot. You know, the wind can blow through there. I think it makes it in better balance. It ripens earlier, less chance for rot. You know, it just gets better color. And keep them watered, like we have drip here, and fertilized. I have petiole analysis done, and just as they bloom, you take petioles like this and send them to the lab, and then they can tell you exactly, you know, what nutrients are in them or what they're lacking. And there's about 15 nutrients that they're looking at.
The Rochioli River Block is probably one of my favorite vineyards, year in and year out. And why? There's some flavors and textures. It's got a very, very long finish to it. It's not the darkest colored wine, but it's a pretty wine. It just kind of screams Pinot Noir. I see a guy who is just the salt of the earth, a real farmer that takes care of that vineyard, and you see the rewards of his whole goal in life. I think when Joe gets up in the morning, is to grow the best grapes he can.
And these blocks there's not a heck of a lot of difference. There's a character in all my vineyards that I don't find in a lot of Pinot Noir. The nose. You can smell it. It's got a nice nose, and some don't have that nose. I don't know what it is.